scattered far, masked with clouds of dust of dead stars. I stand beneath the wind, given the choice. I would want you, given the sequence of events. Given the moment, I would make you mine for a reordering of fate. Given the choice, I would drown in you, overturn the course of the world. The future unwritten tempts me. I could have you. I could have you. Out of dark on the wind, flooded suddenly, fly from within. Rambling words scattered far, masked with clouds of dust of dead stars. Given the choice, I would want you, given the sequence of events. The future unwritten tempts me. I could have you. I could have you. Midnight wind beats the walls of Sahara, overgrown, bloody red marks her. her eyes, blue green is physical steel. Blue green fire for an ancient seal. All that I wanted to rouse in the world is now that shore crumbling to the rushing sea. The churning sky. This is the thing that now moves me to rock. King stood the high walls of Almeria. Bells and cows better in the sea. Through Granada's halls, stern, resilient heart, like a stone tower, lying on top of the wall. Gray the sky like the image we leave behind. Gone cold, turning on, but we want them still. On and on. The fortune of you will rouse me for their call. Dawn's break, the last gate falls in a long deluge. Altar raised in the Alhambra's golden blue. Hello, hello. How's everybody doing today? Close out the music there. That was a little bit of Roman Lion. Let's see. Let's make sure the mic is... I think the mic is sounding okay. Yeah. Well, it looks like it is anyway. You guys will have to tell me how it sounds on your end, but I think it's okay. I think it's okay. What's up, everybody? All right. Welcome to Coffee and the Crusades with your buddy J. Stephen Roberts from Real Crusades History. There's my coffee, Battle of Hastings right there. Okay, everybody is saying that it's sounding good, so that's good news. Good news. All right. All right, well, welcome everybody. It's a lovely Friday where I am. I hope it is where you are as well. So this is Coffee and the Crusades / Ask Me Anything About the Crusades, where we talk all about medieval history and the Crusades and anything you guys really want to talk about at the time. So just a couple of things, get it out of the way. If you want to send a paid question, you can do that by following the description or the link in the description down below for Power Chat Live, where Real Crusades History has an account. Somebody's calling me. I'll have to ignore that. But anyway, so that is an option. That's down there. I will be watching that feed just in case somebody sends one of those in. And what else do we have to talk about? I'd like to ask you guys, if you haven't already, or even if you have, check out knightsofthecross.com, where we are moving forward with the Knights of the Cross project. I'm pretty excited about it, guys. The pilot is going to be done by November, which is really not that far off if you think about it. So everybody will be able to see the pilot episode on the main Real Crusades History channel. Speaking of which, if you have not done so, please subscribe to this channel, the Real Crusades History live streaming channel as well. So yeah. Okay, guys, this is my bi-weekly live stream where I just kind of talk to the community, the group of friends we have through Real Crusades History. Hope everybody's doing well today. I see all of our usual crowd is here. We got Sam, of course. We've got Nalu. We've got Yakov. We've got Declan. We've got Chris. We've got Zytron. So good group of people here, guys. Appreciate everybody being here. And also let's give a shout out to Sheila, who says she can't be here for the live chat. Her husband is celebrating overcoming cancer. I have to say, congratulations on that, Sheila, and God bless you and your family. I've recently experienced that with a family member. Cancer is pretty nasty, and it's always great when somebody's able to overcome that. So that's a blessing for you guys. I'm glad to hear that. All right. Well, what does everybody want to talk about today? What kind of topics should we jump into? That's one thing about this show is it's pretty much whatever you guys want to talk about. So whatever questions about the Crusades you have, thoughts about the Crusades, thoughts about medieval history, whatever you guys have been thinking about, just throw it at me. And while we're doing that, I'll show you guys some books I've picked up recently. This is an interesting one. This is the Lives of the Caesars from Suetonius. This is going to be a good read, I think. This is an important primary source from the early Roman Empire. I've been getting more into the Roman Empire lately. I think that's an important part of our history, and especially like if you're thinking about Latin Christendom. Imperial Rome, well, Roman civilization in general is very important, and it's good to be more familiar with that history. So yeah, this is going to be good. Suetonius. I'm going to start reading this after I finish this book I'm doing on the Mongols right now. I'm reading this one, The Mongols in the West, by the great Peter Jackson. This is an important one. I also got this. I got this more for my kids, but also just like as a good thing to have for the family. Arthurian Traditions. I found this at the used bookstore. This is kind of one of those coffee table type books, I think. And the thing I like about this is it's just full of this great 19th century artwork that I think really captures something about the spirit of Western civilization that I think is important to have on hand for your kids to experience. I mean, just the beauty of this artwork is. Let's see if I can show this to you guys. Here, let's stop the screen share for a minute. But some of this is just incredible. I mean, I like this stuff. I mean, it's not historically accurate artwork, really, in terms of depicting the medieval world. But the great thing about it is just the beauty and the spirit of Western civilization that it captures. I think is. I think it's important especially to expose your children to this kind of artwork when they're small, which my kids love looking at stuff like this. So again, yeah, this kind of Arthurian stuff. This is the kind of imagery you want your kids experiencing. A lot of this is kind of like that pre-Raphaelite type stuff. But I think this was a real gem. This was a couple bucks at the used bookstore, and I just feel like, again, this is one of those things that as a family, you can sit down, look through this, read through this. It goes through a bunch of really good historical information about, the Arthurian tradition and the the cycle of the poetry through the Middle Ages. So it's got a bunch of great information in it, but it's accompanied by just some beautiful paintings from a really good time in the history of the Western world. Mm. All right, now let's jump into some questions from you guys. It looks like, let's see what we got here. We've got a power chat. All right, from Derek. Thank you very much, Derek. $10. Appreciate that, sir. Is season 1 of Knights of the Cross is a success? If season 1 of Knights of the Cross is a success, which I'm hopeful it is, do you foresee additional seasons being made and through the same way via crowdfunding? Looking forward to it. Yeah. Thank you very much, Derek. Appreciate the power chat there. Yes. In fact, Austin and I have talked about it. He even told me, he said, if season 1 takes off, I'm going to, drag you back for season 2. If you have any hesitation at all about it, which I do not. I love the whole process of filmmaking. I've just recently learned that I love that because I haven't been involved in, this level of filmmaking until now, but I do love it. And also I just think it's so important. One thing I got to say to you guys, as we were making the pilot episode and what we're presenting about the spirit of the Crusaders, and I think a level of motivation that was in Richard the Lionheart that I think is rarely explored, a religious feeling. This is very focused on his spirituality. This pilot episode is it's very much focused on King Richard's spirituality, the religious aspect of what he was doing, which I think is very clear from the primary source material that this is at the heart of what he was doing. But it's so rarely explored, and it's so important, I think, to get at that. And that's what I love about what this pilot episode is going to do, because for one thing, it's going to be beautiful. I mean, our production team, Cinema Forte, Aaron and his team, who just have just done amazing work with filming this pilot, and the creativity, the way they stretched every dollar. I mean, these guys are the cream of the crop. But it's just, again, we're focusing on something and getting at the heart of something true about medieval Christendom that needs to be said and needs to be communicated in this format, because this is how you really, in our civilization, this is how you really move people and really touch the soul of a person. In the ancient world, it would be by reciting the Iliad in public, but in our world, it is through cinema. It's through these types of visuals. And I'm just really excited that we're putting this to film, because the way the Crusades are portrayed in popular cinema is it's false, for one thing, but it also just ignores this whole aspect of this intense spirituality and this sense of Christian brotherhood, love of your fellow Christian that drove the Crusades to a large degree. Not to say that that's all that was behind the Crusades. There was all kinds of motivations within the Crusades, because you've got so many people involved. You've got so much history involved. I mean, there were individuals who, I think the Venetians clearly used the Fourth Crusade as a cynical power grab, no question. So this did happen. But that doesn't mean we should ignore this other aspect of the Crusades that I think was really at the heart of the movement, and that needs to be presented in a way that compels people and touches them emotionally, spiritually. So yeah, guys, if you haven't already, do please go to the knightsofthecross.com website. If you can help at all with the project, do. And the other aspect of your question that you just asked there, Derek, about funding. Yeah, I mean, I think that our plan would be to try to also do the crowdfunding again, especially if it's a huge success with season 1. But, with each success we have, that's going to open doors to us and give us opportunities for other types of funding, to move forward. So we will pursue every avenue of funding we can to make it the best product that we possibly can. So Okay. Anyway, thanks again for the power chat. And yeah, guys, down below, if you in the description, there is the power chat link. It's very easy. It's through PayPal. So that's available. I will be watching for that during the stream. Another thing is I've kind of been thinking about moving the stream over to the main channel. I haven't firmly committed to that, but I'm kind of uh, I'm toying very seriously with that idea. I'm wondering if maybe I'm being a little bit too controlling, wanting to. I mean, I've spent all this time building up the main YouTube channel, and now I'm kind of trying to build up another one. And I think it's going very well. I mean, people are steadily getting more subs and more viewership for these streams over here. But sometimes I wonder if it's kind of like reinventing the wheel. Maybe I should just do everything on my channel and just do it that way. But we'll see. We'll see. But for now, I am enjoying this. I think we do have a really good group that comes over here, and I think every time we're kind of picking up more people from the channel, from the main channel. So let's see here. Nalu says, we need new stories to be told. The last 20 years have become too repetitive. I myself am quite bored of most media nowadays. Yeah, and that's another thing too. I mean, I think that like we're doing something with this pilot it's unique. I mean, the cliches of entertainment are not there. I mean, we are doing our own thing, most certainly. And also a cool thing about it too is, when we were doing the script for the pilot, I went through and tried to include as much stuff from the source material as possible. So like a lot of Richard's quotes, like his actual dialogue in the pilot, are things that I took from his letters. It had to be reworked, of course, and changed a bit. But, and if you are somebody who has spent time, for example, I know, Sam, that you have read the Conquest of Jerusalem and the Third Crusade, which is a collection of primary sources associated with the Third Crusade. If you're familiar with Richard's letters in that, you will see that popping up in this pilot. I also took a song written by Richard's great grandfather, the Duke of Aquitaine, who William IX, who is that famous troubadour who wrote some of our most famous troubadour poetry, and I included that. I have Richard's sister Joanna at one point reciting that, or a portion of that, like talking about, thinking about remembering something from their childhood, and she kind of references that. So, yeah, again, I try to include as much from the source material as possible while also serving the interests of the narrative. So, Lambert, speaking of Richard's piety, where was it cultivated? Who was responsible for the spirituality evident in his actions? What an awesome question. Well, I mean, I think we have to remember that we're talking about the late 12th century. This is sort of the height of Christendom. The church is the institution in the society that is most central. Richard is somebody who came from Anglo-Norman background. I mean, really, Angevin Norman, I guess is more what we should say. I mean, he was very much the ruling dynasty of England at this point was essentially a French type of dynasty, if we're going to use slightly anachronistic terminology. But yeah, I mean, this was a close relationship with the church that the nobility had. I mean, his world would have been imbued with the central thing was the faith. I mean, I think that I've heard historians describe it as the sea in which Western civilization swam at the time was the Christian church. I think that's very accurate. I also think we have to kind of understand that this period of time, we're talking about the late 12th century. So this is roughly 100 or so years after the First Crusade. A thing happens at the end of the 11th century in which the church and the Latin nobility, of the West kind of merge in their missions and become much more united in their outlook, in their goals. So by the time Richard comes along, this process has really taken place. And I think he would have been somebody. I mean, this was a man who knew a lot about the church, who was so knowledgeable of church music, for example, that he would sing along with his monks when they were singing the mass. Um, I mean, it's just hard to overstate the depth of faith that was in the society he grew up in. So I think that pretty much every figure in his life, especially like his teachers, I'm sure he had clergymen who were his tutors and his teachers. Even the women who would have taken care of him when he was very young, like his wet nurse, these would have been very religious women. So, which, by the way, we know that Richard was very close to his wet nurse or his nurse from his early childhood. Most somebody like Richard the Lionheart, a member of the aristocracy, would have grown up. First of all, until you're about 7 years old, as a male, you would have been mainly cared for and educated by noble women, or uh, women of your particular house's uh, background, but also a wet nurse would have most likely been your nurse, that kind of thing. I mean, noble women didn't generally nurse their own children. Unfortunately, it's just kind of a different culture. But yeah, I think that probably answers the question good enough. So I try not to linger too much on one question. Okay. All right. Chris, I'm glad you're tackling Richard's religious piety. Most people tend to think of Richard as some crazy warrior king, but not as religious like St. Louis. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't this Victorian idea that he was kind of like a berserker, somebody who just was like went out into the battlefield and just leveled everything out of pure uh, vigor. I mean, the Victorians were funny. They thought that Richard was a great warrior, but like not a great tactician. I mean, absurd, right? I mean, the reason he won so many battles is because he was a brilliant tactician. He was a brilliant administrator. I mean, if the man had just been a guy who ran out there and swung a sword around like, Conan or something, he wouldn't have achieved anything. I mean, the restraint he showed in his campaigns is far more noteworthy than any kind of recklessness. I mean, he could be personally reckless. Like, one thing he would do sometimes is if things were going really bad, he would kind of hurl himself into the thick of things to kind of get his guys going again. But his planning was meticulous. And on top of that, he was deeply pious. I mean, I don't see any reason to think that Louis IX was more religious than Richard. I think it's pretty clear from the source material that it's the same kind of religiosity you see in both men. Certainly the same type of dedication to the Crusades. I mean, Richard committed himself to the Third Crusade at the peril of his kingship. I mean, let's be honest. John, I think what turns Christians sour about King Richard is the slaughter of the prisoners at Acre in front of Saladin's forces. Right. I think that that is probably, one of those things that sticks out. It's kind of like, with the medieval world, you've always got stuff like that. Like, you've got these like moments of brutality that almost seem to conflict with some of the ideals that people are espousing. But we kind of have to remember that, he was a man of war, and yeah, he could be brutal. I mean, I'm not trying to say that Richard was some kind of choir boy or something. I mean, this guy could be, as brutal as any warrior king, and he was on several occasions. What happened at Acre, I mean, I do think we have to remember that it's a complicated episode, and that Saladin has as much to do with it really as Richard did, if not more. I mean, these were prisoners who Richard wanted to ransom. He offered to ransom them. Saladin agreed to ransom them. And Saladin kept breaking his word on that. I mean, they came up with a payment plan even. Like, Saladin said, well, I want to pay the ransom in installments. And Richard said, sure, that's fine. They arranged for that. Saladin kept missing the deadlines. And, I think Richard was making a point. Well, there's a couple of things. For one thing, Richard was under pressure as a result of this. Like, this is one thing people forget about kings too, is that they weren't just acting on purely their own, like, well, I just want to do this. There's even a line in the Ernol Chronicle, where he talks about this moment where once again Saladin had broken the the terms of this agreement. They'd marched out with the army and a lot of the pilgrims to the place where they were designated to meet with Saladin's agents to do the prisoner exchange and also to get back the true cross. And once again, Saladin had broken his word. Ernol, this is something a lot of modern people might miss, but when you're reading that chronicle, you can see how he emphasizes the turmoil in the spirits of Richard's followers, like how upset people were, how people were absolutely, furious and anguished over this. So part of what Richard was doing was trying to was in response to that kind of feeling in the army, but also he was making a point to Saladin. He was saying, "Look, you can't mess with me," because basically what Saladin was doing is Saladin wasn't really taking Richard seriously. He was toying with him. He was trying to delay him and trying to, basically destroy the crusade by bogging it down in Acre with these negotiations. I think that Richard knew that Saladin would not be expecting him to do this, and he also knew what kind of reaction the Muslims who followed Saladin would have. He certainly had. We know that Richard took advice from people like the Templars and people who knew the local politics very well. Richard knew that this was going to damage Saladin's reputation among his followers, which it did seriously. Basically, after this, Saladin was unable to garrison a coastal city or fortress again, for the most part. And there was so much animosity that later at the Battle of Jaffa, some of the Egyptian troops refused to follow Saladin's orders. And one of the commanders of that Egyptian contingent was a relative of one of the men who led the Acre garrison. So we can see that connection there. And he was the one who was recorded by Baha'u'ddin as criticizing Saladin right there at the Battle of Jaffa, being like, to heck with you, like you and your sons take care of this. I'm not doing it. So there was a connection to that. And I think, Richard anticipated that. But again, crucially, he was saying to Saladin, look, don't mess with me. If you mess with me, which Saladin clearly had, he'd broken his word repeatedly. He was basically treating Richard like a bit of a chump. And Richard was saying, look, you do that, you're going to get a response that is going to both surprise you and probably create serious problems for you. So at that point, I think we can see that Saladin never again trifled with Richard in the negotiations and absolutely took him very seriously, as a political actor. So, okay. All right. What else does everybody want to talk about? A lot of good comments in here. Zach, yeah, he didn't find the true cross. Maybe Saladin could have forged one to buy more time. Exactly. Well, that's one of the things that shows you that Saladin was trying to mess with, Richard during this whole thing. I mean, he just breaking his word was one thing, but how easy would it have been to have just gotten some wood and said, okay, here's the true cross. So the point being, if Saladin was really just desperately trying to get the money together and all this stuff, which is the excuses he kept giving, then if he was sincere in keeping his word, then why not just hand over something that can be passed as the true cross? Well, there's a reason why, because Saladin was trying to mess with him. Okay. A couple more good questions here. Is there an explanation why the Saracen had Mamluks in their army? Mamluk was basically just a term for slave soldiers. So these were anybody who was a purchased slave or a captured slave, usually raised from boyhood, to be a warrior to serve a particular individual. The point of Mamluks was really to create a power base for a commander or a ruler that was very, very reliable. Because like Saladin, for example, the most unreliable elements of his army were emirs who kind of had their own independent domain somewhere, like the emir of such and such, or he's got a city, he's got like a castle, he's got his own household and following. Those people were a lot less loyal to Saladin than his very large force of Mamluks, who were his personal property. They were, many of them, raised in his household. They were absolutely loyal to him. So we can see why this was so attractive, especially in the Islamic world, where the political institutions were a lot more fluid than they were in Latin Christendom. This was a way of really creating a solid power base. It's kind of Sam is saying, similar to the Janissaries. Exactly. This is a thing we see repeatedly in Islamic history. It's a thing that makes sense within the context of Muslim civilization. But yeah, the Mamluks eventually became kind of their own thing. They were, I've heard some people describe them as the Templars of the Muslim world, which is a bit of a problem to describe it that way. I mean, I think it kind of creates some confusion. But what the point is that they were kind of an elite type of fighting group, and at a certain point, a certain group of Mamluks overthrew their masters. They overthrew the Ayyubids, and they created what we now think of as the Mamluk Sultanate, which ruled Egypt and became one of the most powerful, if not, at certain points, the most powerful Muslim state in the world. Yeah, and Sam here is saying that many of them were from the Caucasus. A lot of them were Eastern Europeans, because this was a place where this is a place where the Muslims gained a lot of their slaves. And so, like, for example, Baibars, I believe, had like very pale skin and red hair. So a lot of these Mamluks were, they didn't look like what maybe you would necessarily expect. They didn't necessarily look Arabian or, Turkish. They looked more, white, I guess you could say. So that's something to think about. Lambert says, did the Kingdom of Jerusalem recruit and train their own Turcoples, or were they always mercenaries? The Turcoples were probably not very often mercenaries necessarily. The Turcoples were Eastern Christians. There's a really good article. I forget the name of the professor, but if you look it up on JSTOR, like look up Turcoples or something like this, you could probably find it. But there's a really good article where he goes through and basically determines that Turcopole really just represented an Eastern Christian horse archer. These people were Syrians. Some of them were probably half Frankish, half Syrian, Greek, Armenian, whatever. These were guys who were a regular part of the armies. I'm sure some of them could have been mercenaries, but there were Turcopole units. That there were individuals who held fiefs who were Turcopoles, who responded to the regular summons from the king. This is something that has been misunderstood throughout a lot of the history of the modern day study of the Crusades. Only now are we understanding the role the Turcoples played. The Muslim sources talk about them all the time. Like anytime there's negotiations, the Turcoples are brought up. This was a major part of the army. I mean, we don't realize this, but the Crusader armies had a lot of horse archers in them, and these were these Turcoples. This was a military tradition that they grew up with. Eastern Christians grew up with this. They were able to do it. They were able to fight like this. And these were not poor people either. These were guys who, again, some of them probably had estates or some type of fief that they, whether it was maybe a money fief or some, a small estate, whatever it was. These were people who were, vassals, sub-vassals to the King of Jerusalem at some level. So, and there were Templars who were Turcoples. There were Turcoples who joined the order of the Templars, Hospitallers as well. Very interesting component of the Crusader armies. I think, again, we've talked about this a lot, but we really do forget how crucial the Eastern Christians were to the Crusades. It's really, and you read this all the time. Like even in this book I was reading this morning, Peter Jackson repeats in here one of the debunked cliches about the Crusades, that Eastern Christians were the second-class oppressed citizens in the Kingdom of Jerusalem. They weren't. They were an integral part of it. A lot of them had very high status, and they were a part of the military establishment. And this is just something we need to keep in mind. I mean, the reality is that the Crusades need to be understood as a joint enterprise between Eastern Christians and Western Christians. They were not, just the Westerners coming over and doing this. It was a joint effort, and it could not have been done without the extensive cooperation and loyalty of large segments of the Eastern Christian population in Syria and Palestine. Now, I think what trips people up is they think, oh, well, there was so much tension between the Crusaders and the Byzantines. Well, the Byzantines were not the end all of Eastern Christendom. They were one element of Eastern Christendom, but there were a lot of other Eastern Christians who felt a lot more comfortable with the Franks, with the Crusaders, than they did with the Byzantines. This is just the history. So we got to get past some of these cliches. Steve Tibble's book has a good discussion of Crusader administration and talks about how the Latins were seen as a stabilizing force. That's from Sam. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, that's the thing. When the Crusaders started, winning these victories, a lot of the Eastern Christians rallied around them precisely because they thought, okay, so this is the way to deal with this. Another myth is that the Eastern Christians really didn't care whether they were ruled by Muslims or Crusaders. It was kind of like, whatever. Not true at all. The evidence says very much not the case. The Eastern Christians much preferred, mostly, most of the time, not always, but mostly preferred Crusader rule. They participated in Crusader rule. I mean, there were Eastern Christians who held castles for the Franks. You don't get that necessarily with the Muslims. The queens of Jerusalem, many of them were Eastern Christian women. So, Lori LC, why did the Spanish Empire never try to conquer Jerusalem? After all, the main reason Columbus went exploring was because he wanted to fund a conquest of Jerusalem. Interesting. Well, I think, at the time that the Spanish Empire was at its height, the Ottoman Empire was also at its height. And I think the Spaniards were more concerned about not being conquered by the Ottomans themselves than they were about getting to Jerusalem. I don't think that the Spanish Empire was really in a position to challenge the Ottoman Empire that deeply in its territory. Because, what happens after the Crusades and the fall of the Crusader states is Islam begins. It goes further west. I mean, the Ottoman Empire occupied. It's not like that. We're fighting in Antioch and Palestine anymore. Now we're fighting in Hungary and Poland, and we're fighting desperate battles on the Mediterranean. Like Lepanto. I mean, the battle moves west. I mean, the Muslims push. Farther west. I mean, from the south, the Christians push back. Like in Spain, the Muslims get pushed out of that. But at this point, I think other things had to happen before the Spaniards were going to be able to, think about conquering Jerusalem. But yeah, it was something they thought about for sure. I mean, this was kind of an ideal that never really went away. Takaho, do you believe that the Teutonic Knights were even more bloodthirsty and tougher than the Templars? Some say that. No doubt both orders were highly trained and capable. I don't know about the term bloodthirsty. I mean, yeah, these were tough guys. These were fighting men, but I don't know. But, they weren't fighting just for the sake of fighting. Like they weren't like, I have no doubt in my mind the Teutonic Knights I don't think they sat around and said, God, let's just go spill some blood. I just need to spill some blood. I don't think that was what motivated them at all. I think, in the medieval world, this type of warfare was the norm. So, but yeah, I think that the Teutonic Knights had a very different type of thing to deal with than the Templars. It was just as difficult. A lot of people will say things like, oh, well, the Northern Crusades were just so easy. They just went in there and beat up on these poor pagans. The Northern Crusades were not easy. I mean, these pagan tribes are not a bunch of morons. They were, and over time, they had equipment that was very similar to the Christians as well. So, I don't think we can delude ourselves into thinking that the Northern Crusades were some kind of walk in the park. I mean, it was not easy. I mean, the landscape was tough. These dense, difficult forests. um, where the pagan tribes have the home advantage for sure. Okay. What else do we have here, guys? Thank you guys for being here. I guess we're about done. My claim is that these streams are 30 minutes long, but they've been going at least 45 lately, so which is good. Which is good. I'm glad we're doing that. Tony, yeah, the Baltic tribes sometimes defeated the Crusaders. Yeah, I mean, uh, they had their own fighting tactics that were effective. They got more effective as time went on too. I mean, their tactics improved. The they were pretty rough. I mean, when you didn't want to be a Teutonic Knight captured by one of these people, I mean, you were in for a bad time. Who were the Livonian sword brothers? Why did they join the Teutonic Knights? Man, that's a huge question, Zytron. I'll tell you what. I'm going to point you to a video, which I think will explain this pretty well. I'll just point you to my main documentary about the Teutonic Knights, which I did a long time ago. Just short answer, the Livonian sword brothers were another order that kind of started the Prussian Crusade, or the Livonian Crusade, excuse me, before the Teutonic Knights got there. Yeah, check out this video. Especially early on in the video, it goes over the sword brothers. It's just my main documentary about the Teutonic Knights. So, looks like a few people are bowing out. Take care, Lambert. Take care, Yakov. Okay, I'll go ahead and let's do one more question. How about that? But yeah, just a little bit more of a comment, Takaho. The Livonian brothers, they were a much smaller order than the Teutonic Knights, and they kind of fell into a state of corruption where they were no longer really following their dictates and were kind of just acting like normal knights. And the Pope eventually dissolved the order and had them absorbed into the Teutonic Knights, but they suffered some major defeats. But yeah, there's more details in that documentary. John Phelps, did the Templars fight the Mongols in battle? Yeah, there were Templars who fought the Mongols during the Mongol invasions of Hungary. There was a contingent of Templars that actually did some damage to the Mongols during the Battle of Mahi in 1241. So yeah, definitely the Templars. The Templars were one of the few groups during some of those early invasions who were able to really kind of put the hurt on the Mongols, even when they were vastly outnumbered. That's one thing about the Templars. They were often able to do a lot more damage than their numbers should have allowed them to do. So, okay, guys, I think that's a good stream for now. Let's close things up. And thanks, everybody, so much for being here. Another thank you to Derek for the power chat today. And just thanks for everybody showing up here and hanging out. It's always good to have the group. I will be back live again at 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 noon. Next Tuesday. We do this stream every Tuesday, every Friday. 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 noon Eastern Time. Okay. All right. So I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for being here. Subscribe to this channel, please, if you have not done so. Let's keep bumping up the numbers on the new channel, and make sure you're also a follower over at Real Crusades History, the main channel. And that is all for now.